Welcome to another edition of Pulp Nonfiction. Today I have with me Nadean Burkett, founder and executive director of My Practice Matters. And you are based in Vancouver. I know you're extremely active in the dental world. And I think I will leave it to you to speak more to your wide variety of services and experiences in the dental world.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Fransen. I started in dentistry as a chairside assistant in more than 6 dog years ago. So, it's been a bit of a ride. I've reinvented myself several times over. And so now I find myself in a position where a lot of my experiences, a lot of the knowledge that I've gained over the years, I'm getting a chance to put that to good use in supporting independent practitioners all across North America. I even have some that stay in touch in the UK as well. So that's always kind of interesting too, to get their perspective and their interest as well. So everything from career planning to succession planning, practice assessment, performance assessments, and what comes out of that, of course, is valuations when the time comes. Lots of coaching with teams, including the dentist, hopefully, on how to improve their practice model and make it more effective.
Yes. Well, a lot of those things you just mentioned, I think are going to be on the to-do list coming with all that we're facing in dentistry. But my first question to you is the variety of services that you offer dentists and their teams. Specifically, the one that cropped up to me is crisis management. I don't know why that cropped up to me at this particular point in time with sunny skies and no work, but anyway, it's a crisis. So what would you categorize the most important thing in this crisis that we're facing for your average dental office?
Sure. Well, of course, the current crisis is directly correlated to COVID-19 pandemic. That's affecting, virtually all dental practices around the world, not just limited to Canada or North America. And as healthcare providers, dentists and their teams are the most vulnerable. There was actually an article in the New York Times, and if your listeners, your viewers want to Google that, there is actually New York Times is offering a free COVID pandemic update newsletter that contains all of their articles about COVID-19 and what its effects are. But dentistry, according to a graph that they published a few weeks ago, dentistry was shown to be the most vulnerable for exposure and transmission of the contagion of the novel coronavirus. We in dentistry have the opportunity to be exposed to many crises, to many kinds of challenges in our practices, and whether that's mental health issues or whether that's physical disabilities with our patients. There's always something that we have to adapt to deliver the best quality services that we can. There also, this pandemic is also highlighting, I think, and exposing the financial vulnerabilities in dentistry. In my experience and in my observation of doing practice performance assessments, it's interesting that the public believes that all dentists are like super rich and all they do is make money, where the reality really is that their overhead is usually somewhere between 70 and 80% of their revenue. And, you know, that's not being super rich by any stretch of the imagination. So it makes it really difficult for them, because dentists are paid out of the profit of the business, to, you know, hold back some rainy day funds, have that contingency fund within the business to help them through these kinds of situations, these kinds of crises. And, you know, we didn't foresee this. It's something new. It's something unknown to most of us. So that fear of the unknown, coupled with the financial pressures, is really, I think, accelerating the crisis component of what we're talking about here. You know, it's interesting too, because here in BC, the government, the health ministry went to the College of Dental Surgeons and said, "Hey, do you think your registrants would be willing to donate any PPE that they have in their office?" And, you know, dentists, being the generous souls that they are, immediately responded and donated what they could to their local hospitals. Yet they could not they were the only province in Canada that could not get the right language saying to declare this pandemic, and whether or not dentistry was an essential or non-essential service. So that prevented a lot of, well, all of the practitioners that had practice interruption insurance, made them ineligible to collect that. And so, you know, that just compounds the whole financial problem for them.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of unique things to BC. You know, the Pacific Dental Conference, we got a black eye for that.
Yes.
Provincial government came out and said bad dentists, and then the public believed every dentist was dirty because of infected with that, and every dentist should self-isolate. And then the provincial health authority said, you know, would dentists like to donate? And that's great that a lot of dentists did. But I have a friend who's a family physician, and everyone's concentrated on the hospitals. That's great, but the thing other than hospitals is you have dentists keeping patients out of hospitals who can't get supplies. And you also have family physicians and nurses and OTs and physios who are keeping people out of hospitals who can't get supplies. And one of my friend's wife's a physician, and she contacted the Coast Health Authority and said, you know, I need some PPE. And they said, great, we've got some donated stuff. We'll send it to you and we'll figure out what to bill you later. That's a Coastal Health Authority. So they are charging people for distributing their donated goods.
Donated items, yeah.
So in other words, and the Provincial Health Authority is guiding all resources to the hospitals, which is great. No problems with that. But if you are looking to donate, perhaps they are the least in need of the goods because they have the government looking after them. I'm not saying that they're evil or bad, but let's not focus in on just one aspect of it, and we need to stand back, and there's oral surgeons out there, endodontists and general dentists who are seeing emergency patients who are having a really hard time getting their hands on supplies.
Definitely.
So perhaps we need to be a little bit wiser with our donations, which you do as a good deed, and it certainly is a good deed, and there's people doing great work in the hospitals, but then you hit that bureaucratic wall. It's like, okay, we're going to charge you for the donated goods. You're like,
yeah, and I think that just exposes also the lack of, you know.
Well, it's unethical. I think you were given something and now you're charging for it. Well, and you run a hospital.
I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is that there clearly was no plan. They're acting in a knee-jerk way to the crisis, and really compounding the issues, financial, health, and otherwise, by taking some of the actions that they're taking.
Mhm.
And you know, the all of the bureaucracies, I think, I have a tendency to a political political agenda, more so than really nailing down what the actual needs and important processes are to alleviate the health crisis. And you know, we're not asking them to solve the you know, the vaccine issue. We know that they're working on that behind the
Mhm.
scenes, and there's lots of people doing that. But you know, their first job is to help people survive.
Mhm.
Dentists, all of the other healthcare initiative disciplines within healthcare. And yesterday, when I was listening to Bonnie Henry's question and
BC
answer
Minister of Health.
session
Yeah.
last night, and one of the questions was, well, you know, when are the healthcare, you know, physiotherapists and chiropractors and dentists? And I found it interesting that they lumped dentists in with chiropractors and physiotherapists, but okay. When are they all going to go back to work? And her response was, well, you know, not in this particular stage. In the next round, maybe. In the second round, and we'll look at that, and we'll have to decide what sort of processes and what kind of standards that are going to have to be implemented to do that. And you know, to me, first of all, the problem is that dentists, chiropractors, and physiotherapists do not have the same exposure to contracting these contagions. But at the same time, also, to the message should have been, we're working with the College of Dental Surgeons, we're working with the BC or the Canadian Dental Association, because the solutions will come from collaboration. They should not be, and we shouldn't hope to see that their edicts from you know, people that have been distanced by the fact that they're in executive positions. They're not on the front lines. You know, we want to hear as the public that they are working together to find solutions to this, so that people can resume as normal a life, and whatever that looks like for the future. So, you know, I think it highlights a lot of different things. And you know, the fact that they want to charge doctors for donated equipment is, and I hadn't heard that actually, but you know, it doesn't somehow surprise me. But the fact that they want to do that, or they see that, or they feel like it's you know, doing the right thing, is really terrifying to me, because what else don't we know?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. But they didn't ask us how to run it, so they'll do what they're got to do, and maybe to be honest, that won't get seen through. Maybe that won't be followed through. Maybe someone made a mistake, or you know, something like that.
Yeah,
You know,
some
but I haven't had droves of physicians approaching me saying they're scamming, but I had one or two mention that. But moving
yeah.
on,
Okay.
the Nadean Burkett, in your world, what would you recommend as tips or advice for the small dental practice? So they're sitting there, and you know, what life preserver could you throw a dentist at this point in time, and perhaps give them some Burkett pearls of wisdom?
Sure, I'll do my best. Well, the interesting thing is that most dental practices do qualify as small. They're solo, sometimes two dentists, in a cost-share relationship or a dentist and an associate. But the vast majority of practices out there are not large clinics with several, 5 or 6 or 10 dentists running them, or running practices out of them, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So the vast majority of them are small. That I want everybody to understand is an advantage, because when you are small, you are more flexible, you're more adaptable to changes. But also, the most important part of your practice is the relationships that you have within the team and within the patient base that you have. And that patient pool, this is an opportune time for you to build and not just build, but also give them reasons to be your patient, to be loyal, to
So what steps would you recommend for them getting that loyalty, maintaining that loyalty, promoting loyalty?
Sure. Communication is one, and building those relationships is founded on trust and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Those are what cause people to connect with you. And so there's two basic important things. That's finding ways to communicate with your patients, and that's can be through a newsletter. If you don't normally do a newsletter, that'll be something that is probably the easiest to get started doing. There's lots of different applications out there to make that happen, and particularly if you have email addresses. So working with your team to build that newsletter is one thing. That's also a team building exercise, by the way, and having them as the members of your team contribute and take the reins in doing making content and publishing it and sending it out. If you don't have a website, get a website. If you do have a website, this is a great time to update that website, because most dentists build a website and then 5 years later it looks exactly the same as it did when you started. So you want to update that. Add the newsletter onto your website so that other people can see it, and you can use social media to promote that. Go to our website. You're going to find out what we're doing during this time of COVID-19, and how we are going to protect you as we get back to resuming our clinical schedule. If you're not doing a newsletter and you don't have a website, it's probably not likely that you're going to do a podcast. But for those who already do,
or you might have a team member that's keen on it, right? You might be
absolutely, for
now,
sure.
One thing I do that comes up to question: a lot of dental staff are collecting government checks for not working.
EI.
And so how do you say, let's have a team meeting? Then we're like, yeah, no thanks. I'm just collecting my check. And if you dare pay me 1 red cent, it interferes with my ability to collect. And so that's a concern, is like, I'm not supposed to talk about work. I don't want to know about work. I know that, and this is a Canadian thing. They said, oh, we're going to have a program for people to still get benefits if we cut back their hours, but it's ridiculously low amount of money. It's like $1,000 a month. So you're like, okay, well, do you want fries with that? Because it's basically the only person who could work and earn $1,000 a month, right? So your average receptionist, that's very few hours a week.
Oh, for sure.
And she'll hit $1,000 an hour. So like, okay, that's a great soundbite, Mr. Trudeau. Fantastic, but it has no impact on the dental team. And so I'm a bit concerned, and I think some dentists are, is Do you want to be that annoying boss who engages their staff when they're sitting at home playing dominoes and having wine?
Well, but there's also something called teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
and if they want to have a job to come back to, then they may want to engage in those kinds of activities, not just for the betterment of the practice, but also to keep their skills sharp. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they want they should want to develop some skills with regards to understanding what their purpose and their values are. This is a great time to do some team building in that area as well.
It might be a great way for you to find out how strong your team is.
Oh, yes, I was getting to that part.
And who's a team player and who's
And who's not. I mean,
yeah. And so you're like,
you know,
okay.
if you're going to volunteer your time, you can do it virtually through this kind of medium, right?
Yeah.
Where you're all getting together. And I know, I mean, several of my clients are, in fact, I think all of them are getting together with their teams once a week and having these kinds of discussions. And it's not just for practice purposes. It's really, reaching out, listening to them as to what their concerns are, and really hearing what they have to say and validating that, because there is still a lot of fear amongst even those CDAs and hygienists and mostly from the front desk people, the administrators in the office, because they're all vulnerable too. They're financially vulnerable, as you've mentioned, but they're also vulnerable when the practice is reopened. They want to know kind of what's going to happen as well.
So perhaps reach out to your team members via a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Zoom, Skype. I mean, there's lots of different ways of doing it. I love Zoom. I use it all the time myself. But if you have if you exceed limitations for the free version, then there's always Skype or something like that too that you could fall back on.
Okay, so yeah, but I think there's one thing to reach out to the patients, but there's also one thing to reach out to the staff.
And one thing is important to understand too is that patients have different relationships internally within the practice with different members of the team. So the dentist is not always the primary reason why people go to
don't say that. Do not say that. Oh, but you're crushing us.
I know. I've had lots of
on.
clients who have said to me, preparing for succession, right? And they're like, well, I can't tell my team because, they'll tell the patients and the patients will all leave because I'm not going to be here. And so I'd have to sit down and have a talk with them and say, well, sorry, but I think you're going to find that when you tell them, when the patients, are aware that you're leaving, they're probably not going to be quite as devastated as you think, as long as everybody else is there. Because they're the ones that, especially at the front desk, by the way, you're the one that has the first and last communication with those patients. The person who is on the phone with them, the person who's greeting them and dismissing them at the end of the appointment, making their appointments, they know a lot of stuff about those patients. You don't hear it because you got your hands in their mouth, right? So it is important to build internally within the team, and to have them act always. I mean, not just during times of crisis, but always making them your ambassadors of the practice. Because they, when they love you, the patients will love you.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, if you have a strong team and you have a team member who has a particular interest in doing some of this stuff, then you might let them run with it a little bit. I've seen some offices where the dentist pretty much does nothing on social media or anything like that. And the staff run with it and they love it. And they love that autonomy,
Oh,
and they go with it.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely. You know, I loved being a point of contact when I worked in dental offices, because I love people. And most people I find that go into dentistry do it because they love people.
mhm.
So it doesn't really matter, you know, if you're, you know, sterilizing instruments or helping out in surgery. You are still an important part of that group, that team, and you can do other things. I mean, it's not just your clinical skill sets that are important here.
So I would tend to think you want the anal retentive person at this point in time who's perhaps a social phobe to come up with rules and regulations or tips and strengths and basically how you're going to process a patient, because I think that is a new normal that's coming to dentists and dentistry, is
Yeah.
how the patient comes into your office, how they're basically gone from the outside of the front door to how they get into the operatory chair and how they go back out. That's going to change a little bit. Probably
For
be
sure.
standing outside your office with their phone, and you might have, and then you want them to do certain steps. And granted, some of those steps I believe will be for show more so than effect. And one of the things I'm suggesting is, that you have a Listerine or a mouthwash bottle at the front, have the patient take a shot of
Yeah.
that when they come in, and the receptionist does they shoot them in the head to get the temperature,
Yeah.
that thing, and then that's recorded. Now that mouthwash might amount to nothing as far as anything, but it's relieves the patient. It gives them a sense that you're focused and you're looking at stuff, and then you have the patient come back, and then I would have them rinse with povidone iodine, which kills viruses, and then you have someone anal in your office approaching that. And then I think you need to have like rules and regulations for your patients to come in, because they're not looking to come in like the good old days,
No,
right? Where they're leafing through a
no.
magazine and sitting there with 20 other people in the waiting room
Yeah.
and such things. And even if the big authorities, or it turns out that, we can go back to normal, we got a super vaccine and all this, and people's behaviors and fears
They're
are going
they're
to be different.
expecting,
So,
yeah, they're expecting to see a different
mhm,
way of being
yeah,
of delivering dental services, for sure. That's
yeah,
what I'm hearing.
and there
Yeah.
have to be careful of the feeding that fear, where we go nuts, where we look like asbestos
Oh
removal
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a happy medium, but you
yeah,
know, the pendulum generally swings one way and then it swings right back the other way just as far. We sort of need to have that moderation a little bit if we can. But you know, doing, I think, the little things, you know, removing those reading materials that have been there for like 5 years, and even eliminating them from the office, so that you can not expose people to other people's, you know, germy hands. Um, you might want to have the hand sanitizer dispenser also at the front desk when they come in, so that along with the mouthwash, they're dealing with that. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but most places of commerce that are still open aren't accepting cash right now.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's all, you know, tap and pay.
mm-hmm.
So you know, whether it's debit cards or credit cards. So you know, these are a lot of things that the least amount of contact people have with other things, it's important to know from their perspective, not what you're doing, but what you're doing to alleviate their concerns and their fears.
Yeah, yeah. To be a little bit ahead of the curve and understand that the rules and regulations could be
Yeah.
a long ways off before they're clear and make any sense. And, you're alleviating.
Exactly. And hopefully, there are people that are going to set up these new protocols, and standards, that actually give it some thought in terms of how realistic it is to actually achieve them, but also, how do we do it in a way that isn't going to terrify everyone?
Yeah, I was quite pleased with Alberta. They came out with a statement a little while ago, and they said, you know what, please refrain from buying, moon suits and
Yeah,
turning your whole office into a negative pressure room. This is
yeah,
all, they seem like great ideas, but they're not necessarily effective and the
yeah,
best foot forward. And let's let cooler heads prevail and let's proceed cautiously. And like, wow, that's great, because being next door to Alberta and BC, we kind of have a thought that Alberta went overboard with their sterilization, and it's nice to see them not go, because the natural prejudice was they were going to,
yes.
go overboard with their. And I'm not saying they definitely did go overboard with sterilization. That's the perception in BC.
It was, yes.
and nice to see that they didn't go nuts like at this point, and they're actually being quite reasonable and saying like, whoa, settle down. And
Yeah,
I've seen that a lot with a lot of U.S. dentists is, whoa, let's settle down, let's let cooler heads prevail. We know we need to do those things. And the problem is we do have three taskmasters. We got the
yes,
regulating authorities that
yeah,
we're going to judge you today by tomorrow's rules.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And the tomorrow's rules don't even make sense tomorrow, but we're going to judge you today by those.
Yeah,
And then you got the fearful patients, you got the fearful staff. And what the heck? We're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
very
what all
true.
that. Yeah.
And I think that is inciting a lot more fear within the dentist, because of exactly what you're saying. They feel like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, the one thing is to remember that reactions happen when there isn't a plan. So you react to something,
Mm-hmm.
to a stimulus, to some kind of motivation, but responses happen when there has been a plan in place. And because and I think that that's one of the important lessons here, is we need emergency preparedness plans within our office. We also need them within the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's carefully laid out to have an emergency preparedness plan, you can adapt to whatever that particular issue is, whether it's healthcare or financial or otherwise. And that's, I think, one of the most important lessons that we can learn from this, because there were no plans.
Yeah, people keep saying an office manual, and to me that those are like two
Oh no,
words that I hate the most in the
I know
English
you do.
language. Office manual. I'm like, we're gonna need 3 more of these pandemics before I feel motivated to start up. Thank you for choosing to work at Richmond Endo, and these are the rules and regulations.
Well,
Oh, like,
it's not rule. I think that in days gone by, it was a rules and regulation
mm-hmm,
book. But really what it should be is a guide, policies, protocols, and processes.
mm-hmm,
So not rules and regulations, but unless you write things down, you risk um, sloughing over one of the 4 pillars of trust, and that's consistency. Because if you're not consistent in responding to particular situations, that erodes trust. It erodes trust within the team, and it erodes trust within the patient pool as well.
mm-hmm.
So that's, I'm not trying to convince you to do a practice manual, but what I'm saying though is, unless you write it down, it's
Yeah.
they're not really guidelines. They're not really consistent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, shoot.
Sorry.
It's
Sorry
like
to
one you can
burst your
just download. Like, here you
sorry to
go.
burst
Here's the
your bubble there.
average office manual. Because, one of the things I know it's a BC thing, and it just made me awful is when they said, every office has to have a bullying policy. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Like workers' comp. Why don't you just tell us what the bullying policy should be? Because I can write
Exactly.
down a bullying policy. I never bully. Whatever I do is not defined as bullying. That's my policy.
That's right.
You
That's
can't
right.
define what I do as bullying.
That's
There you
right.
go. That's why. And they'll say, well, we don't like your policy. You're like, well, then tell me what the policy should be. I really don't. Like, you got, I don't know, 3,000 or all the employers of the province, and then for the workers' comp, then to say like every employer needs to have their own bullying policy. Like, okay, so then you get to
And what
interpret it.
I mean,
Yeah.
what they need to
Just
provide
give it to us.
to you is
Yeah.
what is considered bullying.
Yeah, just I don't know. It's just
And there's
they're
different
interested in bureaucracy, and we're
Sure.
not.
Sure,
Bullying
exactly.
policy. I will never be that tired at night where I feel that I could write a bullying policy. I will never be that tired. Like, are
Well,
you kidding me? Don't bully. That's
yeah,
our policy.
and for sure, and I guess what's bullying to one person is not bullying to another person,
Yeah, but
depending on which end of the bullying you're on.
I just felt they were
So,
bullying us.
well,
Asking us to write a bullying policy. Anyway,
yeah,
and that goes all in part and parcel with these things. The problem is, I guess, if we rely on the organized bodies, we could be found wanting, and sometimes even tell us like, just come up with your own. And unfortunately, that's probably what's going to face us with the COVID is we have to come up with our own and fly by our best judgments. We don't really have instruments at the moment. We're high in the sky, and we need to figure the safest way to get back onto dry ground. And
yeah.
that's just going to be the reality. Because I remember when this first came out, people were moaning that we weren't getting more direction from organized dentistry. And perhaps the problem is they're letting perfect get in the way of adequate.
I would say they're letting perfect get in the way of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
So we should never strive for perfection because it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
We should only strive for excellence. And when we do that, it changes your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're looking at then is you're looking at how can we consistently do this in a way that best meets the needs and fits our values and our purpose within our practice. So it's about creating a conscious culture, not just within your own practice, but I think more broadly within the profession itself. And that hasn't been done. So it's crazy. But I think that's another lesson I think that we can learn here.
Okay, so we're getting near the end.
Yes.
I know you're a big advocate for the little guys and gals in the dental world. And what are some tips and advice you have, or what do you figure is going to happen to the small independent guys? Because some are predicting this is going to be the death knell for the independent dentist. We're going to end up like pharmacists, and the brands are just going to take over.
I don't think so. I guess I say that a little hopefully, because I know that for some people this will be their end, and because they just won't be able to survive financially.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do things that they need to do, that is not so much focusing on enhancing their clinical skills, but enhancing their communication and leadership skills, then they will survive. They will thrive in the coming in the coming period, the future of dentistry as it now becomes known.
Being small and dynamic, eh?
Small and dynamic, and really focused, understanding what their purpose, what their values are, creating excellence within their practice, creating what the desired patient experience it is for that practice. And there's no formula here. I mean, there's lots of consultants out there that say, oh, we can teach you how to do this. Well, that's fitting your square practice into their round peg.
Yeah, no, I always remember there's a big cultural difference between different countries. And I do know that a lot of Canadian dentists go to different countries, one in particular for practice building. And then as an endodontist, I see these patients come from these offices, and some of the things that are palatable in other countries as far as commercial activity just fall flat on their face here. And so, you do need to customize things. You do need to be
and you need to be true to who you are. You need to be authentic. And the idea that the more patients that I have, the better. No, it's about the quality of the patients that you have. If you don't love seeing somebody come in on the schedule, then that's not the right patient. And the patient's probably not that happy either, but they don't know why. But I think that independent practice has a much greater potential to recover quickly. And when I say quickly, I don't mean within months. I've heard from many different sources that this is probably a 3 to 4 year recovery period to get back to where patients will come in for their routine, their recalls and for elective type of services. And
they're going to be scared about hygiene, and the driver of dentistry is hygiene.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I do know some dentists are like, well, we might be able to get,
but that's
negotiating from a point of strength with hygienists. The only reason you're able to, the hygienists were able to command such a wage was because
they were in such demand.
Profitable.
For sure.
And there's such demand. And you can pay your hygienist less, but the unintended consequences of that is less patients are coming in for treatment, and they're a little more scared of treatment, and blah, blah, blah.
Sure. And that's why those practices, those small practices with intimate relationships with their patients, if they're preparing the patients to return now, while you still are in this particular phase of the epidemic, the pandemic, then they're going to be prepared to come back sooner.
All right. Well, I think that's all super fantastic. If you were to wrap it up into 5 simple points, the Burkett 5 take-home points.
Use your fear as motivation to improve your practice. Understand what your practice performance level is, what your purpose and your values are as an individual, but also as a team, because that will create a conscious culture that you want to have in your practice. And from there, you can then really reach out to your patients with confidence, because it's not like you're flying by the seat of your pants anymore. I actually see this as an opportunity for dentists to improve.
Yes, no, absolutely. Shore up a strong team, strengthen the office. It's going to be a bit streamlined for the next little bit, and
yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Nadean. That was absolutely wonderful. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I do have a website, and if people want to go on there to find some articles and even subscribe to my newsletter, I would love to have them do that. And if they have any questions, I'm always available.
Yes, we'll put your website up beside the interview on the PFX site.
Perfect.
Some people will comment on it. We'll send you the comments, and then you can engage and chat. And onwards and upwards.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dr. Fransen.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure indeed. We'll chat again sometime.
Thanks.